If you have questions or suggestions for future podcasts, please submit them in the comment section below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. People should be free. Hi, I'm Dave Arnott, the Christian Economist. Well, the U.S. Declaration of Independence calls them inalienable rights because it assumes they came from God, not from government. Here's a little bit of the philosophical background. The free view aligns with the Protestant concept that the human being is a free moral agent whose moral function requires the exercise of free will. See, for the Christian, every person is tasked with making moral decisions as voluntary acts of their own free will. The non-Christian view has no use for moral agency based on free will because the materialistic morality of utilitarianism of their economy is based on simple conformity to a social consensus of what are considered best practices. Conceptually, there's no room for an individual's moral choice in that way of thinking. It is this conformist materialist philosophy that is the root of the cause of what we now see as the cancel culture. And that aspect is the concept of these non-free folks. See, but in the free view, it is the individual who chooses, but under the non-free view, the individual is one who conforms. See, I've used a simple diagram showing it that in the free market capitalism idea, economic decisions are made by individual choice, whereas in socialism, decisions are made by group force. In our book, Biblical Economic Policy, Sergei Seytamatov and I list 10 commandments of economics. The first one is the title of today's podcast. People should be free. Increasingly, people are becoming less free. Here quickly are 10 ways in which they're becoming less free. Free enterprise. See, the title kind of explains what Christian economists would favor, don't you think? See, do you want a free economy or a government-constrained economy? I've explained in many other podcasts that it's only in a free market capitalist economy that an individual can exercise their command to give, which we consider as biblical. See, in a socialist economy, where the mantra is from each according to his ability and to each according to his need, people only get what they need. What's left over to give? Free trade. Free trade makes nations richer. Constrained trade makes them poorer. Constrained trade is one of the few choices on which President Trump and President Biden agree. And they're both wrong. 100% of economists agree with the following statement, according to the economics textbook I use in my classroom by Gregory Mankiw. Quote, trade with China makes most Americans better off because, among other advantages, they can buy goods that are made or assembled more cheaply in China. End quote. Whenever you get 100% of economists agreeing, we should probably pay attention. If we really did get richer by buying in products and services only from our own country, wouldn't buying only at the state level, again, make our state richer? What about buying only in your county? What about constraining your purchases to your city? Maybe we should buy only products made on our street. How about just at our home? See, it gets kind of ridiculous, doesn't it? See, the same rules apply at the national level and at the house level. Make what you do best and buy the rest. It's pretty simple economics, and it also happens to agree with our Christian worldview. I can't find a scripture that tells us to discriminate against Mexican products nor Chinese products. Freedom from government. In their book, titled 3 Felonies a Day, Harvey Silverglate and Alan Dershowitz point out that we have so many confusing and contradictory laws that bureaucrats make decisions for us. Their point is that we are no longer guided by laws made by our legislative bodies. That role has been turned over to entrenched bureaucrats whose job is supposed to be only implementation of those laws. Another book titled False Promise of Big Government, Patrick Gary writes, big government does not help the poor, the working class, and the middle class, even though those groups provide the justification for big government. In fact, big government often hurts the supposed beneficiaries of government largesse. Those who gain the most from big government are the elite and the powerful. Roger Scruton authored a book titled How to Be a Conservative. In one of his writings, he makes the case for conservatism as the party of freedom. He writes, "Those tasks that only governments can perform, number 1, defense of the realm, number 2, maintenance of law and order, number 3, the repair of infrastructure, and number 4, the coordination of relief in emergencies. According to Mr. Scruton, all other activities should be in the private realm of the economy." Freedom of opportunity. See, that's opportunity, usually expressed as equality, not equity. My podcast number 90 is titled Equality or Equity, and it explains that equality means equality of opportunity, while equity means equality of outcome. In his book, Discrimination and Disparities, Thomas Sowell points out that no society in history has ever had equal outcomes among various groups. When President Biden announced his vice president would be a black woman, that opportunity was then denied to people in other groups. Their freedom was removed. When he announced his replacement for Stephen Breyer on the Supreme Court would be a black woman, he denied that opportunity to people in other groups, and their freedom was reduced. In his famous "I Have a Dream" speech, Martin Luther King Jr. called for a country in which his children would be judged not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. Kamala Harris was judged by the color of her skin, and the next nominee to the Supreme Court will be judged in the same way. That denies the freedom of opportunity to other people. Free to serve the poor. Every economic policy can be categorized as either growing the pie or dividing the pie. It really is that simple. I'm continually amazed by seemingly bright people who don't understand this. I've said many times, socialists are good at demand, but terrible at supply. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said in an interview, "We have more supply than demand of products." Now hold it. Hold it. Who has more supply than demand? That's not true in Cuba. That's not true in Venezuela. That's not true in North Korea. She's right. We have more supply than demand in America. Where did that supply come from? It came from the free market capitalist system that she denounces. She's a self-avowed socialist. So there's no record in history where socialism has produced more supply than demand. Matter of fact, it's rather impossible by definition, as I said just a moment ago. If socialism follows the idea from each according to his ability and to each according to his need, where would the excess supply come from? Socialism is committed to fulfilling needs, not wants. I unpack more of this idea in my podcast titled 105, The Free Market Feeds the Poor. Freedom to be vaccine-free. One of my best students is deciding whether to take his forced COVID vaccine and stay in the ROTC program or be forced out. He's had COVID twice, so he has natural immunities. And his reasoning, I think, is exactly correct. It's not so much about taking a jab, because he's had several vaccinations for other diseases. He's deciding whether he wants to spend his career working in an organization which makes such decisions that are not based in fact and reduces his freedom. He continues to explain. He's a very healthy 20-year-old who's at very little risk of COVID death. In her book, Atlas Shrugged, Ayn Rand mentions that eventually the good people will stop working, leaving organizations populated only by those who don't have the ability to leave. One of the Army's best is about to shrug. It's true of all organizations. Constraints push the good people out, and you're left only with those who can't leave. To some extent, the vaccine mandate will do that to the U.S. military. Freedom from crime. The Christian worldview contains only three elements: creation, fall, redemption. Economics started with scarcity after the fall. If you deny the fall, bad policies result. And the current result is higher crime. Defunding the police denies the fallen nature of humans. Humans are fallen. There's so much ample evidence that I won't waste my time on the subject. Energy independence. Germany lost their freedom when they approved the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline that was supported by President Biden. They're unable to stand up against Russia's forthcoming invasion of Ukraine because they are reliant on Russia for energy. There's more to be said about this, but in brief, Germany almost bankrupted the country building solar and wind farms. Their citizens pay 42 cents for the same kilowatt that I pay 10 cents for in Texas. Who's more free? My fellow Texans at 10 cents? Or the Germans, and the French, by the way, when they pay 42 cents? In the meantime, Russia's building a gas pipeline to China to reduce its reliance on revenue from the gas sales to Europe. Get it? Europe is becoming more reliant on the Russian supply. Russia is becoming less reliant on the European revenue. This will end badly. Freedom from discrimination. Jordan Peterson resigned from his tenured position as a full professor at the University of Toronto because the students he produced would be discriminated against in the hyper-partisan academic environment. I will refer again to the book Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand. She says that at some point the productive people shrug and stop providing for people who are not working. Jordan Peterson just shrugged. Freedom of life. That means for the unborn. If we care about those among us who have the least power, we should care about babies in the womb. Since they can't vote, they don't have a voice of their own, so someone has to speak for them. Listen, 1/3 of the U.S. black population has been eliminated by the Democratic Party policy of abortion. That sentence is a fact, not an opinion. Here's the simple math. There have been about 63 million abortions since Roe versus Wade in 1973. Let's round that down to 60 million to make the math easy. Blacks make up 13% of the U.S. population, but have 36% of the abortions. Let's round that down to 33% to make the math easy. 33% of 60 million is 20 million. That's a reduction of the black population by 20 million. There are currently 42 million blacks alive in the U.S. Let's round that down to 40 to make the math easy. Without abortion, there'd be 60 million blacks in the U.S., but because of it, there are 40 million, making the following statement a true fact. The U.S. black population has been reduced by 1/3 by the Democratic Party policy of abortion. Why that's not a headline in the news every day continues to astound me. Let's close with this. Libra means liberal arts of the free man. Okay, when the Romans wanted to create a society where the common man could vote, they created liberal arts education. Liberal comes from the Latin term libera, meaning free. So a liberal arts education is not free from tuition, as my Dallas Baptist University students want it to be. It is the education that is necessary for a free society. To make intelligent decisions about voting in a free society, individuals must have a basic understanding of politics, economics, social behavior, and leadership. They have to understand the fallen nature of humans that I spoke about earlier. A liberal arts education is well-rounded, preparing people to function in society as a whole person. Other freedoms, well, I'd like to speak about freedom of thought, freedom of religion, school choice, freedom from excessive taxes, and others, but I'll have to save that for another podcast. I hope you're getting the point. By this single concept, freedom, we can separate just about every religious, political, and economic concept. I'm Dave Arnott, the Christian Economist. Fear God, tell the truth, earn a profit. See you next time. For more information, please visit us online at davearnott.com. If you have questions or suggestions for future podcasts, please submit them online or in the comment section below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.